The Rams make a very significant cut, and we have an update on Stetson Bennett. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and also drop some mailbag questions down below because we are banking all those. We're going to answer them throughout the offseason. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. Dodgers Nation, SI, 24/7 Sports. Now the Rams 4 Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He just finished his 8th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on the X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, the Rams made a very significant cut. They're looking to re-sign and bring back one of their players, and also an update on Stetson Bennett. That's coming up. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now, Travis, of course, you got to start with something else before we get to the main topic. And I don't know if you saw this. On GQ, there's a spread with Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp where they're both wearing these crazy denim suits and these denim outfits. It looks like they're attending the CFL honors, the Canadian Football League honors, or something like that. A little Canadian wedding announcement. Did you see this, Travis?
I have not, but I can picture it in my mind's eye. All I needed to hear was Canadian wedding outfits, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's I don't even know why they did or why it's even released right now. But hey, man, those guys, they know how to dress, and yeah, I'll definitely send it to you at some point. But yeah, so let's get to the news though, because Brian Allen cut after 6 seasons with the Rams. They announced it a few days ago. And look, there's a 4th-round pick by the Rams in 2018. Signed a 3-year, $18 million extension in 2022. Started 32 games, played in 50 since being drafted. But it was all about someone that was set to have a cap hit of a little over $8 million this year. They released him. They saved $4.9 million, gives him a dead cap money of $3.15 million in 2024. We talked about this. Every listeners will know we said that this was a lock to happen, and sure enough, it did, but a little sooner than we expected.
Yeah, I think this is, like you said, Doug, I think this feels more like a spreadsheet move than it does something that they were displeased with him as a player necessarily, because I think he filled a couple of roles for this team over the course of his career wearing a Rams uniform that we saw him as a capable starter for a period of time, and you saw him as a useful backup at other periods of time. And I don't think he ever really became maybe the in a perfect world, the player that the Rams were looking for when they drafted him originally. But I also think that, this is a guy, like you mentioned, who has started a lot of games in the NFL. It's just that, that life in the NFL boils down to a pretty simple equation at some point. Do I love you? Okay, fine, you can stay. Do I like you? Okay, what do you cost? And that's I think where they ran into Brian Allen. Byron Allen has nothing to do with the Rams. Byron Allen is a totally different guy. But Brian Allen rather just became a player that they probably liked, but they didn't like him at that particular number.
Yeah, and it's not a huge surprise, like we just said. I mean, we saw the restructure they did the last offseason. They basically all the linings were under that. This was going to happen. And look, he's someone that in 2021, he was the starter in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. So you're going to remember Brian Allen for that. But look, I think this really points to the direction that Sean McVay and this offense is heading in, where you're shifting. You're looking for a larger, bigger bodied offensive lineman. You're not looking with like someone like a Brian Allen who's just not a part of the future with the vision, what they're trying to build.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think this is why Kevin Dotson and Steve Avila were so important to what they did last year, to what you just said, DMAC, which is basically they're going to get bigger and nastier, right? That this is kind of their goal, and especially in that middle three, like we've talked about. And it just seemed like they were far more comfortable with Coleman Shelton in that role than they were with Brian Allen. And they're going to continue, I think, to look for opportunities to improve in the middle of that line. We'll see what happens with Dotson. I know that you and I are both very high on bringing him back. Hopefully, Avila obviously is under contract for a while, having just drafted him a year ago. But this is kind of the core of their line. Left tackle is something that I think they're probably still considering, thinking about. Rob Havenstein's been here a long time. He's been holding down that right tackle spot for a long time. But this is life in the NFL. You don't get to keep those five guys together for a very long time. And once he lost that starting job, this felt like something that was probably coming down the tracks for a while.
For sure. And I think one of the biggest things here that they're trying to accomplish this offseason is you're thinking about the future with this offensive line. They did that in the last draft when they drafted Steve Avila. They didn't go out there and get the shiny position players, the skill guys. They didn't try to trade up for Zay Flowers or anything like that. They knew what they needed to do in the last draft. They got someone that played in every single snap in Steve Avila. But also you think about today and you also think about in the future. But I think that what I want to see is Matthew Stafford get the offensive line that he deserves for the last part of his career. Get him the best offensive line as you possibly can. Keep him upright. We know that he's going to have success and help lead this team to another Super Bowl run.
Well, go back to where we were, about a year ago from right now, that when we were talking about this team coming into the season, into the draft, it was about how are you going to fix the offensive line? Seeing what happened in the year of their Super Bowl defense, seeing what happened in the 2022 season, it was a catastrophe really from beginning to end. And the reason it was more than anything else was the inconsistencies on that offensive line. And once the offensive line was bad, it was only a matter of time until Stafford got banged up, which he did. And then the whole thing just stopped working. Well, this year, the offensive line, I think, was good. Was it great? Probably not. I think it was good. And I think they're going to continue to try to improve that, because you're right. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You've got playmakers at wide receiver. You've got a running back who has proven to be very effective. And none of this matters if the five guys up front don't work well. And they're trying to improve it. I think that they're good, and I think they're looking to get very good.
And we could see a lot of change in this offense. And we're going to talk about a potential change and someone that they want to bring back, but he could be gone. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
This next segment is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we need the opportunity to, get something off your chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to kind of gnaw away at you, to get at you. It's important to let it out, especially somebody who's not really biased in your life, right? Who's an unbiased observer. So today I want to tell you about something about how I've been feeling. You might even be thinking about that same thing this week. And that is the fact that the Dodgers still do not have that fifth starting pitcher, right? That you only have four guys that you feel great about. So usually it's a lot more important than a little sports thing along the way. And therapy can obviously be different for everyone. And our favorite sports teams are a part of it. But even if it's something small like that, even if it's something you need just to get it off your chest every once in a while, and that's where BetterHelp can come in. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible. It's designed to be suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off of that first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get 10% off of your first month.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Travis, by the way, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see it? There it is. Okay.
The outfits are one thing, but the pose is taking it to a whole nother level. It looks like one of those Jase Penny, like weirdo family portraits from the 80s.
It totally does. It totally does, man.
That's tremendous. Like almost like a Step Brothers vibe. That is just terrific. I love it.
Again, big Step Brothers fives. I'm telling you, man. Like, look, I don't want. We're talking about trading Aaron Donald. A couple of just keeping the NFL leagues. This is the CFL right here. This is the Canadian Football League. These Canadian tuxedos. I'm just saying, man. Look, I don't know anything about fashion. I truly don't know anything about fashion. But I will say the only rule I do have is you can't wear the jeans and the jean jacket at the same time. That's the only rule I know.
One or the other. A pair of jeans, great. Denim jacket, actually not that bad. Together. Nope. Pretty easy.
I want to see Travis and Slee do that same picture and with the same outfits for a billboard. I want to see that billboard.
Dude, I was rocking the Levi's jean jacket in 8th grade. I had the sweet one with the red and black lining. I thought I was the Fonz, man. I was a badass.
That's a killer jacket. And when you get the little furry collar vibe happening too, that's how you know you're really doing it.
That looked good. You're
really doing it. But here in our second segment, speaking of offensive linemen, that's really one of the big topics this offseason is how they could lose 4 of their 5 offensive linemen potentially the way that things go. I mean, of course, I think they're going to keep Havenstein. He'll still be in the mix, but anything's possible, really. And I think one of the big questions is what do they do with Coleman Shelton? And Coleman Shelton is someone who, in his contract, because he played 55% of the snaps in 2023, he could void the final year of his contract, and that comes with a $2 million salary cap hit of the $5 million. But Sean McVay, he said yesterday on a Zoom press conference with reporters that he would, quote, really like to keep Shelton in Los Angeles. Now, he's not great. He's not elite. He's not a Pro Bowler, but he is good. He is solid. And at that price, I do think he makes sense.
I do too. And I think what's interesting is he was the one player that they actually went out of their way to keep a year ago, right? When we were talking about the Rams in free agency and quite frankly, the lack of activity in free agency last year, the one guy that they signed was their own guy in Coleman Shelton. So obviously they think of him pretty highly. I think where the Rams have an advantage and is they're good. And they know players around the league know they're going to be good. But players inside the organization, I think even more so, understand the culture of the franchise. They understand why it works the way that it does, why it's successful the way that it is. And assuming the money is good, that the money is competitive, I think the Rams are always going to have an opportunity to keep guys like this because, look, if somebody comes in with an extra 15 or 20%, then buy. You're not going to be able to compete with that. But if the money's really close and it just comes down to you got a better place to play, a better place to win, a better place to live, then the Rams are going to be a tough putt, right? That's going to be a tough team to talk about when you're the other team and say, well, you should come here instead of there, unless it's a team like the Chiefs or something like that the sales job is not going to be particularly effective because the Rams have put all the pieces in places that players want. They're treated incredibly well. They're competitive. They play in a beautiful stadium. They play in a big market where they get a lot of attention. So it's all of those little things I think can make a difference. But that, of course, assumes that the money is at least close enough.
Exactly. And you're not looking for someone who's going to change your franchise, right? But you realize that there's other moves that need to be made, even along the offensive line. You want to bring back a Kevin Dotson. You want to go out there and address the edge rusher position. You want to address the secondary, right? So you can't be elite at every single position. That's unrealistic. So having someone like Coleman who is dependable and someone who last season, he played in 17 of the Rams' 18 regular season games. If you look at his production overall, he was on there for a career high 1,171 snaps. He allowed 36 pressures, but only 2 sacks. Only 2 sacks and had a run blocking grade of 74.6, according to Pro Football Focus. So, look, we talk about Matthew Stafford and keeping him safe and keeping him vertical, but also I think you have to build this offensive line with the run game in mind. I think Coleman Shelton is someone that absolutely can be additive from that sense and can provide value at that price, like we said.
Well, and I'll throw one other thing in there as well, that there's a certain familiarity with that particular position and the quarterback and working well together. You know, I know you and I we talk about baseball all the time, but there's a little bit of that pitcher-catcher thing that goes on, a little bit of that middle infielder communication that goes on, and just understanding what your quarterback wants, and sometimes it's unspoken. So, you know, there's a lot of good reasons to bring him back, but here's the thing, and whatever the Rams decide to do here, I feel pretty comfortable with, simply because most of the decisions that they've made over the course of the McVay and Snead era have been pretty darn successful. So if this is something that they feel like they need to do, and, we heard that they want to bring him back, so I think that's encouraging. I would imagine that this is a place that he would like to be. The wild card is somebody coming in heavy with money and saying, a couple extra million here or there over the course of a couple of years is real money. And this is the NFL and stuff happens fast. So you got to go get it while you can. So hopefully they can at least stay close enough to make him think about it.
Yeah, and you brought it up, the catcher-pitch relationship, the continuity, the cohesion. 3 of the Rams' 5 starting offensive linemen could be free agents this offseason. Yeah. I mean, just the thought of that is a little scary, and I think that you want to solidify the interior of that offensive line. You can even have Steve Avila as a center one day, and you draft another guard, and Shelton is a depth piece. We know from a couple years ago you can never have enough depth along that offensive line, right?
No, I mean, the fact that he can play multiple positions, I think, is incredibly valuable, right? Because your tackles are your tackles. Then occasionally you'll find a guy like Joe Noteboom who can go inside and do some things there. But, the fact that you have a guy that can play guard, that can play center, that can move around the way that he is, it's a valuable piece. And this is something that the Rams have done really well outside of 2022, where the whole thing, and again, I think it would have worked pretty well in 22 if players hadn't gotten injured the way that they did. It wasn't that the performances were as bad as they were. It's they were playing third, fourth, sometimes literally even some fifth string guys in places, and they just weren't NFL caliber players. I think had they been able, and then once even those guys, once they finally did start to play them week in and week out, which didn't happen until, weeks 12, 13 and beyond, even that kind of settled down a little bit. So I think that speaks to the continuity that you were talking about, Doug, that just understanding that, look, if you got to swap them out, you got to do it. That's one thing. But if you can keep some semblance of continuity from one season to the other, one game to the other, that does make a big difference, I think.
For sure. And I think that if you look at the success they had this season, kind of building on that, the momentum they have with that, you can't just let Cut No Boom and let Jackson and Shelton and Dotson walk and expect to completely replenish that offensive line around Havenstein and Avila and just expect them to hit the ground running, right? They built chemistry. They are a unit. Yes. You saw them get nasty during certain times with the run game last season. I think that, look, you just don't know how a guy is going to perform when they're in your system. They have the familiarity with these guys, and I think that Coleman Shelton, absolutely, they're going to find a way to get him back. And look, the reason why this is even a conversation was because he was able to stay on the field and have success. Yeah. Like I said, played over 55% of those snaps. So it's really a no-brainer, in my opinion.
I would love to see him back. And I think that, the more that we talk about it, the more important I think it is that continuity is together. I know it's a cliche and everything else, but it really is like a hand, right? That the fingers need to know what the other ones are doing to make the grip work, or however you want to characterize that. I hope he's back. I think that the fact that the Rams said it publicly, I think is meaningful too. I think that means that that's probably signaling to him and to his agent or his representation or whoever it may be that, hey, look, we're going to find a way to get this done, because when you speak front office language that we want to bring him back usually means he's coming back. The we'll see what we can do is never good news, and we hope the player is this is never good news, but we want him back is usually a buying signal.
Could not agree more. I think that's a fantastic point. I wasn't even thinking of that. Look, I speak fluent Sean McVay. Just the fact that someone, a coach, anyone that actually speaks contracts or even shares any opinion towards a player, yep, that says a lot. Because 99.9% of the time, it's I don't talk about free agents, I don't do this and that, or talk about players along those lines of contracts. So absolutely, for sure. Now, coming up our next segment, though, we do have an update about a player that we've talked a lot about on the show that really hasn't played a lot for the Rams, and that, of course, is coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, if you are a new customer, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your first bet wins, right? All your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and, of course, a whole lot more. And D-Mac, I don't know if you saw this, but they fired a stray at my man Kirk Morrison, who I do the Rams pre, half, and post with. FanDuel posted on their Twitter account, let's name random old NFL linebackers. We'll go first. Kirk Morrison was the first guy out of their way. So good job on you, FanDuel, for bringing up my guy, Kirk Morrison. But if you're a new customer, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
And just think about how many people wishes they could have caught a stray and played at least one snap in the NFL. So, hey, man, he still got it. That's how you know he still got it. People still, hey, the only thing worse than not being talked about is not being talked about, right? So, hey, right. It's good. It's good for his brand. It builds a buzz. People are probably Googling him, watching his old highlights today because of that tweet. But, yeah, coming up here in our last segment, just a little update on Mr. Stetson Bennett from Sean McVay. He was asked about Bennett, and he said about Bennett, and you figured out, all right, where are you at, and is this something we feel like is best for him and our football team to bring him back into this ecosystem? Those will be conversations that we will have, and then I think once we have a better idea of what we'll do with that, then that will give clarity. So we talked about the concise comment on Shelton. Exactly. This is word salad. This is translation. Okay, when we get first chance we get, he's gone, and we're not answering another question about him.
Yeah, look, bingo, D-Mac. That's the dead center of the bullseye. That is the exact opposite of we would like to keep the player. We would like Coleman Shelton to continue to be a part of this team. That was 3 or 4 sentences that I could, for the life of me, not tell you what they mean. I have no idea what it means, other than he ain't coming back. We don't want him back. He did something. I don't know. Nobody's talking about it. I'm sure that we've all heard different rumors about what it is and whatnot, but they could not get him out of there fast enough. And every time his name has come up since then, it's a answer like that, which is, huh? He's not coming back. They blew the pick. He's, maybe he'll figure out how to play football somewhere else in the NFL or elsewhere. I don't know, but I feel very, very comfortable in believing that Stetson Bennett will never play football for the Los Angeles Rams again. There hasn't been one indication to the contrary that they are interested in having him back, that he's close to coming back, that they're rooting for him to come back. It just seems like they're trying to cut that, like you said, as soon as they can get it done, dot their I's, cross their T's, that this will be a former Ram as opposed to a current Ram.
Yeah, and this is no disrespect to Stetson Bennett. I'm not going to speak on speculation as to what he's dealing with, but in the Rams' case, from their sake, look, he's going to be released at zero cost to the team from a cap space perspective. He was on the non-football PUP, so they're going to release him. They're not going to answer any questions. And look, this was a risky pick at the time. It was a risky pick. He was an older prospect. He was undersized. He had played in a stacked offense with the best players in the country, and there were some better guys out there, and that's clear at this point. And he's someone that, it was I've said it before, it was a pick that they got a little too cute about because of the connections, Georgia, this and that, and they kind of liked the idea of it, but just never made a lot of sense. And look, this is the reality too. At the end of the day, you can't risk the roster spot on him, and that's what they're not going to do. I will say also, Travis, I don't even think he's eligible for the FanDuel Random Ram or anything like that. Okay, I think that he doesn't even. He can't play in a regular season game, right? That has to be a regular season game.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going to go next, D-Mac. But let's not forget, because it happens so fast, but let's talk about the last time we saw him play really quickly. He got benched in a preseason game. That never happens. That he was supposed to play that entire game. They hooked him early in the second quarter, and we never saw him again. Like literally, we never saw him again. This was he's not on the active roster, to he's left for non-football reasons, to these whatever Sean McVay talks about when he talks about this. They benched him in a preseason game. So whatever was going on, it happened quick. It was something that they were not pleased with, and they have never looked back. The preseason, we're done. That's not good enough. Sit down, and we never saw him again.
Yeah, and Travis, you know my favorite thing too about preseason games when someone gets benched, they hate to like admit that he got benched. They find some other excuse why he didn't play, he didn't get benched. He got benched because of poor performance.
Oh
yeah, and just and also it wasn't one rough game; it was two rough games for Stetson Bennett. If you look at his preseason numbers, I don't even know why I have these, but preseason numbers: 36 of 62, 347 yards. 2 TDs and 3 interceptions. So even if there's a world too where even if everything had worked out for him and he was a there's anything PUP related, if he was just fully healthy, he was on the roster, there's a world where he still wouldn't have made it even in that case.
He didn't look like an NFL player. You know, he had that one brief moment in that very first game. You're like, okay, kind of pulled something out of his hat. And it was like, oh, all right, that looks all right. And from that point forward, it just didn't look right. And I think they probably knew pretty quickly that they had missed an opportunity. They picked the wrong guy. Look, it happens. You know, you can afford a whiff on a Stetson Bennett when you hit a bullseye the way you do with the Puka Nacua and some other guys along the way. So it's not the end of the world, but bye.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I'm going to love talking about this draft class 10 years from down the line, not just because of the great players, but it'll be fun to talk about just some of the misses they had too. But that's every draft, right? That's every single draft. But hope he is well wherever he is, and I wish him nothing but the best. And I hope that somehow, some way, he can make something of his career. But that's what we do for this episode of Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. And of course, my name is Doug McCain. You can follow me at DMAC_LA. And the People Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, you can follow him at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.